So this week's episode of Faragon was a very exciting episode. Not only do we have a great action sequence towards the end of the episode, we also see a pretty interesting political climate as what would happen after you save the top dog in this kingdom. Well, a reward would be in order, and unlike with most rewards where you get, a medal, a parade, something like that to say, hey, you did good, let's compliment you. What if you got a fairy weapon? And we learned that there were these 7 knights who have these super powerful weapons that can do some pretty devastating damage, but there's one for each person. And I thought that was so interesting learning that one of the dukes already has a fairy weapon and, can use it to protect the Lord and Savior that is currently uniting the world. However, one didn't have one. And this is so interesting to me because when this sequence all played out last week where the assassination was attempting to be made and then you see only one actually try to save them and the others just kind of standing idly by not knowing if they should save them, it's pretty interesting seeing how everyone in this story is trying to make political moves, these power moves, to put them where they truly want to be. One doesn't have a fairy weapon, and if you get that, it will put you on a more even playing field to basically what would be your competitor, your opponent, that you're trying to probably take out, but playing nice face to face. And that's so interesting because you can tell that this request is a pretty severe request. I want a weapon of basically mass destruction, all things considered in their world, and you can't really deny it because not only has this person proven that they can be trusted by saving the Prime Minister, you've just been working with him for so long, there's no way you can deny it, but nobody likes this move. This is a dangerous move that not only puts him on an even playing field to other dukes, however, it also puts him in a spot that he could easily take out probably most soldiers who get in his way, and he's justifying it as he'll be able to protect the Prime Minister a lot easier in the future. That is an amazing situation. You knew it wasn't going to go over smoothly. The characters' faces was saying everything you needed to know that this was a dangerous move, and I love just how shaky this atmosphere is. From Dorothea's perspective, or just some of the higher ranking members in this political chain, everyone can pretty much predict to a certain degree where certain things are going to go. However, because nothing truly bad has happened at the moment, you can't really deny this request, and that's really interesting, seeing that you could play this long con game of playing nice, being the hero, the savior, being someone who you can trust in to then possibly stab you in the back once they have all the power they need to take what they want. And that's so interesting because you truly never know where Faragon actually wants to go with its political atmosphere, and episodes like these are just the payoff that I always anticipate because there's so many interesting pieces at play. Everyone's playing a game of chess, and everyone thinks they got checkmate. It's just a matter of time before they can truly show their cards to all their opponents, and that's super fascinating. The sacrifice at the end with Oz was pretty emotionally heartbreaking, even though I didn't have a strong connection to this character. Personality was fun, character design pretty solid overall, and had a pretty badass fairy. It's seeing what he does to these characters, and just seeing how heroic he was saving Marlia in basically the nick of time. If he wasn't there, she would have died, and I like how this was a scene not meant to make us sad because we have a strong connection to this character, but rather showcasing why these other characters are so emotionally broken after the death of someone that was close to them. For Marlia, she doesn't even know this man too well, however, this was someone who was becoming a comrade, becoming a friend, and to see what he was willing to do for her, essentially a complete stranger, and seeing how broken that makes her, it's a really touching sequence. This entire episode in terms of its action was actually really well thought out. There's a lot of human-on-human combat, which I thought the animation did really well. The art wasn't the sharpest and crispest of the season, of course. It's not going to blow you away like a ufotable character design. However, the overall body movements and just body language with the fight, with how they were manipulating their weapons or just hand-to-hand combat, I thought was actually pretty fun. I thought there was some thought to it. It wasn't the most creative fight I think we've seen in Faragon to date. However, there was enough strategy, and just because of the scope of this battle with so many soldiers, it added quite a bit of flair to it, with all the guns going off, trying to hide behind cover, trying to get your moment to either attack head on or attack from a distance, seeing the fairies pop out. It really highlights why I love the designs for the fairies so much, because you can see how well they mesh in with darker backgrounds. Anytime they're in a dark lit scene, you really get to see how they blend and mesh in with the world so well. And even against some of these characters, typically they do look off-putting from the character models because they're fairies, they're not humans, they're not supposed to mesh in that well. However, this episode had quite a few shots where I was like, you know what, they actually blend in with with the 2D quite well, and I thought that was a really nice touch overall. I love just the sheer creativity behind the overall designs. As soon as you see a fairy that you've never met, you immediately can tell what it's going to do, whether it's going to be something that's just pure brute force that's going to knock a train off of the tracks, or if it's going to be something a little more manipulative from the distance, or something like Marlia's who's going to burn people alive if they get in her way. I just love the overall functionality to the fairies, how they add so much to these battles. Even though this is called Fairygon, the fairies aren't actually the main focus 90% of the time. We talk about fairies, we see them from time to time, but it's definitely more based on the human interactions, the political atmosphere, and what the fairies did in the past and what they currently can do in the present. And I like how they don't overuse the fairies, but when we do get to see them, I do think they add quite a bit, either to a battle with how they just spice it up, where we have all these guns going off, all these characters running for their lives, and then in comes a giant-ass fairy that just disrupts the entire battle and can possibly shake up the battlefield in a completely different way, which is really exciting. And then when you see what these fairy weapons or the fairies or what's happened in the past with the war, it's so interesting to me to see how it all plays out and functions. It's a really exciting battle overall. And this probably had my favorite of the flashbacks that we've seen. We've got a glimpse into Marlia's past and pretty much who raised her, what's happened. We knew she buried someone, and I like how we get the final touches, or at least I assume the final touches, to one of her sections of her past, which I thought was really touching. Someone who is pretty much dead on the road, got picked up by a stranger who raised her back up to health and was teaching her how to hunt. Even though she wasn't someone who naturally wanted to kill animals, he taught her everything she needed to know to survive. Don't waste anything. If you're going to hunt something, use all of it for your own benefit. You can't just kill something and waste it. It's completely disgraceful. And I like how you get a very short moment, but enough to see what happened to her. This cursed child who everyone that she loves gets killed, and then once again, the same person who kind of raised her had no reason to do so, ended up sick and dead, and she had to bury another one, thinking once again it is the curse, she is the cursed child. And I think it just ties together a lot of what's happened in her past, which ultimately might have led her to be so positive in the present, because she's a very bubbly person. She seems like a very charming person, and you would think, well, she doesn't feel like she's suffered that much. Like, what's her deal? She's lost everything. Why is she always so happy? And you can tell that it's a defense mechanism. Someone trying to hide away her own pain and just knowing that if she gets too close to anyone, they're probably going to end up dead like pretty much everyone in the past. And I like how we're slowly seeing relationships be formed, whether that be with some of her closer allies within the squad to even just some of her old connections that she's trying to regain. You can tell that this is a girl who is scared of connections and truly wants those connections, but knows that anytime you get too close, they end up dead for her. And once again in this episode, someone who she didn't even have that strong of a connection with ended up dead, once again highlighting the cursed child mentality. And I think it's a pretty tragic character, which I really enjoy. I think there's actually quite a bit of depth to her character, which at first glance, myself included alongside many of the people on the internet, were saying she's kind of one note, but the deeper we get into Fairygon, the more we learn about her past, the more we learn about what she's doing in the present. It actually feels like there's quite a bit of range to her emotions, and you can really tell both from the past and the present why she's so afraid of people and why she puts on this bubbly persona but doesn't actually get connected to too many people, because they'll ultimately end up dead. Granted, this line of work is going to kill a lot of people, so she shouldn't blame herself, but seeing how much she's lost and just why she does blame herself, you can't really blame the girl, even though you just want to give her a hug and say it isn't your fault. They were all willing to do this for anyone, but of course you know that's not going to get through to her. This overall episode was one of the more visually weak episodes for a lot of the simplistic shots, a lot of pretty sloppy character models, backgrounds, things of that nature, but it didn't really take me out of the focus, because when we're focusing on the politics, my eyes were glued to the screen, my heart was racing, being like, holy shit, what is this reward truly going to do? This is just the first core of a 2-core series. We're seeing the little pieces get made that we know are going to have major impacts to the second core, if not the remainder of the first core. And you know it's going to shake up everything, because this prime minister, he might have some allies right now, but I think by the time we get to the second core, this man either is going to end up dead, in prison, or in for another war, something to that nature. You got Arkham, all these little factions trying to shake up everything, and we're getting to see their personalities at a first glance, and then as we see those personalities more and more, we learn what is driving them, and there's so many characters left to explore with their backstories, but I am glad at the very least that we have Marlia, who is someone who has been criticized as being pretty one-note. We're starting to see that there's a lot more to her writing than we first gave credit to, and I assume that's going to be for a majority of these characters, especially because it is going to be a split-core series. And even when we were in terms of the politics, when it was in the action, even when the art was dipping, the animation itself was pretty damn fluid, and really added into that impact, especially when you just see a train just derail. You're like, holy shit, this is kicking off. And I love how just a couple of minutes prior, you see the man put on his seatbelt because he knew what was coming. There is so much sabotage and corruption in this series, and I absolutely adore it, because past Marlia and a couple of characters, you can't really trust anyone's intentions, and that's so interesting, especially for a war that ended 10 years ago, and the unification is so far from being perfect. This band-aid is basically being reapplied day by day, and that band-aid is so ready to fall off for good, yet the Prime Minister is doing his best to keep it on there, and you know it's not going to be too good for him. But overall, I thought this was a great episode, even with the production issues I did notice. But for everyone who did watch this week's episode of Fairygon, did you enjoy it as much as myself, or did you have more issues than me? Let me know down in the comment section below. And if you did enjoy this video, be sure to drop a like, and also hit that subscribe button if you haven't been new. So until next time, everyone, please take care, have a good one.